Ford did something deeply evil. Not with guns, not with weapons, but through negligence. This is the story of a car company that knew a vehicle was dangerous and still put it on the road. This story is not about speed, not about luxury. It's about a small, cheap car built to be affordable and fuel efficient, but instead became linked to fatal fires, horrific injuries, and preventable deaths. People trusted it, families bought it, and some never made it home. This is not just a tragic story. This is the story of a decision that placed profit above human life, a decision engineers warned against, a decision executives chose to ignore, and in the end, a decision that exposed one of the darkest chapters in corporate history. Ford Motor Company was founded in 1903 by Henry Ford in Detroit, Michigan, USA. Ford changed the world by introducing the moving assembly line in 1913, which made cars faster and cheaper to build. This innovation turned cars from luxury items into products ordinary people could afford. In 1908, Ford launched the Model T, one of the most influential cars in history. By the 1920s, millions of Model Ts were on the road, and Ford became one of the largest and most powerful car companies in the world. Over the decades, Ford expanded globally, producing iconic vehicles like the F-Series trucks, Mustang, and Explorer. The company also played a major role during World War II, manufacturing military vehicles and aircraft, and in the 20th century, due to the rising global competition and financial struggles, Ford decided to produce an affordable and fuel-efficient car. This single decision caused chaos and haunted its history. In the late 1960s, Japanese cars were flooding the US market. They were everywhere. They were small, fuel-efficient, cheap. At a time when gas prices were rising and American cars were getting bigger and thirstier, these foreign cars felt practical and smart, and Americans were buying them fast. Ford saw the sales numbers. They saw their market share slipping, and panic quietly set in. Executives feared that if they didn't act quickly, Ford would lose an entire generation of buyers. So a brutal order came down from the top: build a subcompact car in 25 months. To understand how extreme this was, you need context. Normally, developing a new car takes about 43 months. That time is used for redesigns, safety testing, and fixing hidden problems. But Ford didn't want perfection. They wanted speed. Inside the company, a phrase summed up the mindset guiding the project: safety doesn't sell. From that moment on, deadlines mattered more than caution. Costs mattered more than concerns. And from day one, corners were cut. Production started, and in 1970, the Ford Pinto was introduced to the public.
Meet the Pinto, just born. Pinto, the new little carefree car from Ford.
Here's the heart of the problem. It wasn't hidden in software. It wasn't complicated engineering. It was the fuel tank. On the Ford Pinto, the fuel tank was placed behind the rear axle, just inches from the rear bumper. There was very little protection between the tank and whatever hit the car from behind. In a rear-end collision, even at relatively low speeds, a chain reaction could begin. The metal could crumple, the fuel tank could rupture, gasoline could spill instantly, a spark could ignite it. And within seconds, the car could burst into flames. The tragic truth is this: Ford engineers knew. Crash tests revealed the danger again and again. Internal reports documented it clearly. One engineer summed it up in a single word: it's a fire trap. And what makes this even harder to accept is that the solution was simple. Fixing the problem did not require a redesign of the entire car. Engineers proposed small, practical changes: a protective metal shield, a stronger, reinforced fuel tank, slight repositioning of components. The cost? About $11 per car, but by that point, Ford had already frozen the design. Changing anything now would mean production delays, higher manufacturing costs, missed launch deadlines, and to Ford executives, those risks mattered more than safety. So instead of fixing the car, Ford did something unthinkable. They turned human life into a calculation. Ford created an internal document, not a rumor, not a conspiracy theory, a real, written memo. It compared two things side by side. On one side, the cost of fixing the fuel tank. On the other, the estimated cost of deaths, injuries, and lawsuits. When the numbers were added up, the conclusion was cold and clear. Paying victims was cheaper than fixing the car. This document would later become one of the most cited examples of corporate moral failure in modern history. And while these decisions were being made in boardrooms, people kept driving Pintos, completely unaware. Now, to be clear, not every Ford Pinto exploded, not every crash caused a fire, but some did, and when they did, the consequences were devastating. Families were burned, passengers were trapped inside, survivors were left with lifelong injuries. In 1972, a young woman named Lily Gray was riding in a Ford Pinto when another car hit them from behind. The crash was not extreme, but moments later, the Pinto caught fire. Lily Gray did not survive. The driver, Richard Grimshaw, lived, but with severe injuries that changed his life forever. Grimshaw and Gray's family filed a lawsuit against Ford. The settlement was settled with $2.516 million, and Gray's family $559,680 in damages. But it didn't end there. The jury ordered Ford to pay $125 million to punish Ford for its reckless conduct. Ford appealed the judgment, and the court reduced the award of punitive damages to $3.5 million. However, the court denied Ford's request to have the punitive damages award thrown out entirely, finding that Ford had knowingly endangered the lives of thousands of Pinto owners. There are claims that over 500 to 900 people lost their lives in the Pinto fuel tank explosion. However, according to the U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, it's documented that only 27 people lost their lives in the rear-end crashes involving Pintos, where fire was a factor between 1970 and about 1977. Lawsuits began to pile up. Journalists started asking questions. In September 1977, Mother Jones magazine published an investigative article titled Pinto Madness by journalist Mark Dowie. In that article, the magazine exposed the dangerous design flaw in the Pinto's fuel system and cited internal Ford documents showing the company was aware of the risk of fuel tank fires before the car went on sale. The piece characterized the Pinto as a fire trap and raised public concern about how Ford had handled the safety issue. Because of this publication and the attention it drew, consumer advocates like Ralph Nader held a press conference, and the controversy helped push regulators and the public to demand changes to the Pinto's design. The Ford Pinto was no longer just a car. It became a symbol, not just of poor engineering, but of profit placed above people. In August 1978, Ford Motor Company was charged with criminal negligence after the deaths of 3 teenagers in a 1973 Pinto crash. A grand jury in Indiana said the company might have been responsible for killing its own customers. Imagine that. A huge company on trial because of something it sold that hurt people. Inside the courtroom, it was very serious. Families of the victims sat quietly. Photographs of burned cars and crash tests were shown. People could see how bad it was. It was a mess, a sight not to behold. The trial got a lot of attention. Newspapers, TV stations, everyone watched. People wanted to know, could a company go to jail for killing people? This case got the interest of the whole world, but in the end, Ford was not found guilty. The jury said Ford did not break criminal law, even though the company had documents showing it knew the Pinto could catch fire and still sold it anyway. People were furious. Families of the victims raged in anger. It was all chaos in court that very day. Everyone was convinced that the jury had been bribed because the truth was obviously visible to the blind. The case had only one direction, which is holding Ford accountable for negligence and violations. In fact, people couldn't believe the outcome of the case, and Ford representatives walked out of the court unpunished for their deliberate crimes. However, even though they were not punished in court, Ford paid the families of the victims. They gave money to the families whose children died or were hurt in Pinto fires. It could never bring the victims back, but it was Ford's way of trying to make things right. Even with the settlements, the damage was done. People lost trust in Ford, and the scandal changed the car industry forever. In 1978, Ford made a recall. The fix focused on reducing the risk of fuel tank fires in rear-end crashes by reinforcing the area around the tank and limiting fuel leakage, along with minor structural changes designed to reduce fuel tank rupture and fuel leakage during rear-end collisions. Because of the Pinto, car safety rules got stronger. Cars were designed to be safer in crashes. Fuel tanks were better protected. Crash tests became stricter. The Pinto also changed how companies think about safety. Engineers and business leaders began asking, what if our design hurts someone? Is it worth saving money if people could die? The Pinto story is still taught in schools today. Engineering schools, business schools, law schools. It's a warning. Numbers on paper can never replace a human life. The Ford Pinto story is not just about a car. It's about choices. It's about what happens when speed matters more than safety, deadlines matter more than people, money matters more than warnings. The Pinto shows how some companies can risk people's lives just to make money.